you guys actually going to say something?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to begin the public meeting for the Active Erie Transportation Plan. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Rob Lee. I'm the Communications Director for the City of Erie. Tonight, we will have a review of the Active Erie Transportation Plan, the process, the timeline, and the implementation. And joining us for that is Dan Fritz from WRA. Following that, we'll have Jason Check, the Deputy Solicitor from the City of Erie. He'll be explaining the parking exceptions. After Jason's presentation, we'll then open it up for public comment. If you are speaking, there is a sign-up sheet in the back on the little table there. Please sign up. When we're ready for public comment, you'll line up on that side of the hall, and you'll come to the podium, state your name and your municipality, and then we'll limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and then questions will be answered following the public comment section. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dan Fritz from WRA.
All right, thanks, Rob, and thanks everybody for coming this evening. I know this is a great project that everybody's here to find out more information about. And you want to go to the next slide, show you what the agenda is for tonight. So we want to cover a little bit about the background and history of this project, the Active Erie project, and the Green Garden Bikeway. We also want to cover the Green Garden Bikeway design and how that's evolved throughout this process. Also, I'll cover a few rules and regulations for bikeways, and also the feedback that we have heard to date. And then lastly, I'll cover a few next steps in this process. So like I mentioned, the Erie Bikeway project and the Active Erie Transportation Plan has a very long history. Back in 2015, a bike lane on Green Garden Boulevard was identified as a desirable connection as part of the Erie Urban Bike Loop Trail. So this project's been talked about for quite some time. The picture that you see on the screen is actually a map from the Erie Urban Bikeway Plan, and you can see that Green Garden Boulevard, if you click to the next slide, is actually highlighted yellow, and it was identified early on as one of the key routes along this corridor. It would connect to the Bayfront Parkway Trail on the northern end and at 38th Street on the southern end. So based on the aspirations of this project, it was eligible for funding through PennDOT and the Erie MPO. So the Green Garden branch of the Erie Urban Bike Loop Trail appeared in the Erie County Long Range Transportation Plan as early as 2017. So just to make everyone aware that no city money is being used on the development of this project or the Active Erie Plan. The southern leg of the Erie Urban Bike Loop Trail, which is along 38th Street, was marked with sharrows by PennDOT during a paving project in 2017. So that project is completed. In 2019, the City of Erie secured funding through the PennDOT Erie MPO, which is the local planning organization, to study bicycle and pedestrian transportation needs throughout the whole city. And that was the creation of the Active Erie Plan in 2020 and 2021. So the Active Erie Transportation Plan, the purpose of that is to create a blueprint for better walking and bicycling conditions throughout the city. That plan was presented to City Council on February 3rd, 2021, and subsequently was adopted by City Council. So the goals of the Active Erie Transportation Plan are to improve safety and no matter how you're traveling. So that includes walking and bicycling, and really another goal is to make walking and bicycling convenient, healthy, and affordable. So some folks don't have a choice as their mode of transportation, and so based on some studies, there are approximately up to 18% of Erie City households do not own a vehicle for transportation. They walk or bike or use some other mode. So that's a rather high percentage of folks that rely on other modes of transportation besides vehicles. So the Active Erie plan was led by a steering committee of folks that you see on the screen. It was comprised of numerous stakeholders, everybody from City of Erie folks, the traffic engineer, also the public school system, public transit, and PennDOT was also involved in that. So we had a rather large steering committee that helped guide this process. Unfortunately, when the process of developing the Active Erie plan started, it was at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as a result, in-person meetings were put on hold, and we had to pivot to more online surveys and virtual meetings. So an online survey and interactive map was created through June 7th to July 31st back in 2020. And as part of that survey, we received 328 responses, which is pretty decent. There were also numerous advertisements and mailers that were sent out. We also held 2 online listening sessions. And lastly, we created a moving mobile workshop that was held in October of 2020. So this was our way of outreach to the public in as personal of a way as we could at the time, given the circumstances. So the next couple slides, I'll discuss some of the survey results we received as part of the Active Erie plan. So the first results that I show here, the majority of survey respondents drive a car as their primary mode to get around the city. But what's interesting is a large percentage of people also walk and bike as a mode of transportation. As you can see, secondary and the third is ride a bike. So it is prevalent. The next survey question was asked, if you don't currently ride a bicycle to get to your destination or don't like to bike as much, why? What are some of the reasons? And I think this kind of gets to the root of the Erie Bikeway, Green Garden Boulevard Bikeway project, in that 50% of the respondents said there's a lack of safe bicycle infrastructure to get around the city. And so second to that was drivers do not yield or stop for people who ride a bike. So there's definitely a need for additional bicycle infrastructure throughout the city. So the next step was creating a low-stress bicycle network. So this was kind of the guidebook for laying out the various routes and bicycle network throughout the city. So we approached this by using recommendations from some federal highway guidance, which is based on the 7 principles of bicycle network design. And those include safety, comfort, connectivity, directness, and cohesion of the network. So the results of that exercise resulted in a plan for 7 north-south bikeways, one of those which is Green Garden Boulevard. And then the next slide shows 4 east-west bikeways, one of which is 38th Street, which is currently completed, and I believe 6th Street is going to be underway here shortly. So the Erie MPO allocated $350,000 in the 2021 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program for construction of the Green Garden Boulevard Bikeway. Green Garden was selected for funding first because it had been identified so early on in the process, and also it had some of the least impacts, didn't require moving curbs, it was mostly pavement markings and signage to complete the project. So funding for the Green Garden Bikeway project allowed the project team to figure out exactly how to design the bicycle infrastructure along Green Garden Boulevard. And to do that, we used various state and federal design guidance, which you can see listed there. There's numerous resources out there, but these are just some of the guidebooks that we used in developing this design. So we began by using the Bikeway Selection Guide to determine what bike facility type is preferred along this segment of Green Garden. We limited that to trying to accommodate what we could, like I said, between the existing curb lines and not incurring additional expenses. So you see on the next slide, this portion of Green Garden Boulevard has relatively low volumes by the shaded yellow area. The estimated traffic volumes are between 3,000 and 7,000 vehicles a day, and the posted speed limit is 25 miles per hour. So based on that, the preferred bicycle facility are bike lanes, and preferably buffered bike lanes, some sort of painted or physical buffer. So this project includes funding for pavement markings, which include everything from shared lane markings or sharrows between Bayfront Parkway and 12th Street to buffered bike lanes between 12th Street and 16th Street, and also between 26th Street and 38th Street. Also, the bike facilities would include being accommodated through lane narrowing and the removal of on-street parking. So next I'll cover the project area block by block to show what the current design is. So the first block you see here is between the Bayfront Parkway and 12th Street. Like I mentioned, this area is being accommodated through shared lane markings. Also, I want to point out that the traffic signal at West 12th Street currently has accessible pedestrian signals. I think those were recently installed as part of a separate project, but that's a brand new traffic signal at that intersection. The next block is between West 12th Street and West 16th Street. So directly south of 12th Street, we are maintaining a bike lane in each direction and keeping the current left turn lane at the intersection. We didn't want to affect any of the turn lanes throughout the corridor. We wanted to maintain existing operations as they are today. But just south of the left turn lane is where we begin bike lanes with a painted buffer. So that extends all the way to West 16th Street. South of 16th Street is where we enter the narrowest portion of the corridor. In this area, we're able to accommodate a travel lane in each direction as well as a single bike lane in each direction. The next section is between 21st Street and 26th Street. So in this area, between 21st Street and 25th Street, it's also fairly narrow, so we maintain one travel lane each direction, as well as a single bike lane in each direction. And then as we approach 26th Street, we transition into shared lane markings, and the reason for that is to maintain the existing left turn lane on the 26th Street. And also at 26th Street, that signal is slated to be upgraded here in the near future, and it will also have accessible pedestrian signals at the conclusion of a separate project. The next section is 26th Street through 32nd Street. So this is the Green Garden Boulevard section. This is where we transition to the removal of on-street parking, and we introduce a travel lane each direction and bike lanes with a painted buffer. So I just want to point out that these blocks will now have a buffered bike lane instead of on-street parking. And the last section of the corridor is between 32nd Street and 38th Street. So I want to point out that 32nd Street, the traffic signal there was recently replaced. It now has accessible pedestrian signals and all brand new infrastructure there. But at this point, the one single travel lane in each direction with the painted and buffered bike lanes will continue all the way down to 38th Street, where it will transition back to shared lane markings, and riders will be able to either transition to 38th Street or wherever their destination might be. Also, I want to point out that the shaded design plans that you see a little snapshot on the screen, these are still available on the City of Erie website. I provide a link there. I checked the link this morning. The link still works, so if anybody's interested in viewing those, they are still available on the City of Erie website. So now I'll cover some of the public feedback that we've gathered thus far. So back on January 18th of 2022, we had a public plan review and comment period. There was also a recorded presentation that was posted on the City of Erie website. So based on that, we received some early public feedback and made some modifications to the design. Again, in January of 2023, we held a virtual information session. And for that session, there were letters sent out to all the residents along Green Garden Boulevard. So everybody was notified about the meeting. And again, on February 15th, almost a year ago, we held an in-person public meeting here in council chambers where the Bikeway Design was presented. We again gathered additional public feedback and made some revisions as a result of that. There was also an online survey that was conducted between March 17th and March 31st of last year. That online survey gathered 676 responses, which I'd say is really, really good. And based on all that feedback, there was a council study session held in April, and some of the outcomes of that design study session included the removal of the vertical delineator post. That was something we heard from the public. That's part of the physical separation I mentioned. That's preferred, but as a way of compromise, we removed those physical delineator posts and we just went with a painted buffer. And then also there was the beginning of a no parking ordinance with exceptions that was discussed. And that'll be covered after the presentation here, the final outcome of that ordinance. So I have a couple rules and regulations I wanted to review. Folks may be familiar with these, but both in the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code and the City of Erie Code, bicyclists are required to use hand and arm signals to communicate their turning movements, just kind of signaling, where they're going and kind of claiming their right of way as a part of that. And then the second regulation I wanted to cover is part of the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code. So motorists must allow at least 4 feet when passing a bicyclist. And, ideally that's accomplished through painted buffers or some sort of buffer adjacent to the bike lanes where that can be accommodated. And then the last slide I have here is about next steps of the project. So the project has been under design for quite some time. The original bid documents were advertised in July of last year, and bids were opened in August. Unfortunately, but not surprising, those bids came in a little high, and it was also determined that the contractor who won the bid wasn't qualified to do the work. So we revised the bids, removed some of the work to reduce the scope and budget of the project, and it was re-advertised in September of last year. Bids were opened in November, and again, the bids came in slightly high, but additional funding was requested from the Erie MPO, and that additional funding was granted. And I believe on January 17th of this year, Council had a first reading to allocate the funding for construction of this project. And on February 7th, hopefully, Council has a second reading to allocate the funding for this project and award the contract to the contractor. So that's where we're at right now. And again, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And if you have any feedback, we're going to take some public comments here in a little bit. But I also listed Bill Hayden's name and email there. He's a City Council, City of Erie project manager for this project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason to cover the no parking ordinance. Thank you.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? Thanks. Thanks. I'm Jason Check. I'm the Deputy Solicitor. I've been entrusted with going over what are some of the proposed exceptions that are in an ordinance that's been worked on. And I think some or most of those you may have seen already in the press release that was sent, I believe, last week sometime. So those were pretty much taken from the proposal. But essentially, I'm going to go over them, and then the goal here is to let you know what the proposed exceptions are, and then during public comment, if you have literally any commentary or question or concern, the goal is to take some notes and take those into consideration when finalizing this. So I'm going to say this isn't set in stone. It's got to be finalized, edited, polished, and then it's got to be presented to City Council and the mayor for their consideration, if that makes sense. So there are 17 exceptions that I have in my draft. Now the first 6 are what I call kind of like the common sense exceptions, and these really relate to safety. So we're in the process of creating bicycle lanes, obviously for bicyclists, but we also want to make sure there's awareness and safety of like who can use the bicycle. And so obviously, in case of, say, an emergency, so the 6 exceptions, if I go through them, one, you got ambulance, police, and fire. Well, we want to make sure that the bicyclists know that even if they're in the bicycle lane, they do not override an emergency. Okay, that's kind of common sense. The second one is activities engaged on, say, the Erie Metro Transit Authority or another public agency. So you can't get in the way of a bus is pulled over to let passengers on and off. They're allowed to use the bike lane. The other ones were, utility, like we had all those windstorms recently, and so people lost their power, so Penelec was fixing that. So if a utility truck is doing some sort of maintenance or repair, another vehicle is associated with, garbage collection, obviously they're going to pull over if they might be in a bike lane. After doing some pothole repair or something seasonal, so anything that's kind of government related or public service related, those are exceptions to the bike lane. Now, the other ones, so I have what are on my list are 7 through 10. These are, I think, inspired by some of the comments that were referenced earlier. So one, people were worried, well, what if I have a relative I'm dropping off in front of my house and there's a bike lane? Am I going to get a ticket? Or am I going to get in trouble? And so some of the exceptions we have here are that you can pick up or discharge a passenger. If you were parked in the bike lane, that would obviously be a short time period. So we're looking for things that are short time periods that would be permissible, and that where you wouldn't get, no one will get in trouble. So that's picking up or dropping off a passenger. People nowadays, if you use Uber Eats or a delivery service, or Walmart, I think if you have a Walmart Plus subscription, I think they deliver your groceries even, that would be permissible, obviously. Because I do know that I think there's the policy of some delivery companies not to use the driveway. So like that's particularly important for them. They might get in trouble actually for going into your driveway to do the delivery. The other exception was vehicles that are engaged in loading or unloading, property or passengers. It kind of goes part and parcel with the delivery, but it kind of expands it. So like, what if you're moving into a house or an apartment or something like that? That covers that. Let's see here. Oh, I have it. Okay. So the other one was vehicles engaged. Like you hire a landscaper or a snowplower. They're going to be maybe parked there temporarily to do what you're paying them to do. So those are all kind of more for home property ownership. Now, my exceptions that I've listed as 11 through 14 really deal with what I would call traffic situations. So obviously if a police officer is waving you to go into the bike lane to go around a car accident, or if there's some sort of response that way, or you all of a sudden you think you might get into a car accident and you have to swerve into the bike lane. Okay, those are things that would be traffic related. Those would be obvious exceptions there. If you have someone driving towards you, you have to drive into the wrong lane or the bike lane. So those are things for your own personal safety, because you don't want to hurt someone in a car accident. So that's 11 through 14. Now 15 through 17 are also, I believe, taken as input from prior meetings. So this would apply. So I know that there is an annual, that's what I've done, is an annual community garage sale or neighborhood rummage sale of the sort. People are saying, well, wait a minute, there's excess parking, because that's a well-known event and people come to that every year. So that would be something listed, that if there are people parking in the bike lanes, on the dates of those sales, those are well-known, published in advance. So that would be fine. It's also going to talk about, well, the local church, if there's a wedding or there's a celebration of a religious ceremony, that's also one of the exceptions too, because if the church parking lot, there's a lot of people coming for that particular ceremony, or that's there. And then lastly, there is, what we've listed is when parking is actually permitted. Like, the parking authority doesn't give tickets on major holidays. It's Martin Luther King Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, and there's some other ones. Those are listed in the ordinance. And then there's other exceptions as well. So those are what we've got listed in the actual thing that we've been working on. And again, like I said, this isn't set in stone. It's set to be revised after today's meeting. So that's my presentation, and obviously we'll be taking notes on what is said or question. Well, once I'm done, I think you guys are going to be able to come up to the podium, is my understanding. So I'm going to, well, you can bring those up in now. So I don't think I'm going to be answering questions like I work for the White House correspondent. So I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, we will begin the public comment now. If you have signed up, please line up on that side of the room. Please remember to state your name and your municipality. We will limit the comments to 3 minutes, so please be respectful of your fellow residents who will be commenting. So whoever wants to come up, you can come right up.
Hi, Adam Trott. I live on Highview Boulevard, and I'm with Bike Erie. I wanted to clarify a few things. One is when people ask, should you ride on the sidewalk? The cutoff for that is age 13. If you're 13 or younger, then that's fine. But if you're older, then I believe it's code 49 that kicks in, that regulates when sidewalks, where they are at and how busy they are. Like, for example, the sidewalks downtown have way too much commerce going on. You're really not supposed to ride on the sidewalk downtown. But suburban areas and things, that would be more permissible. The second thing is to clarify some gray area about what is unloading and deliveries. And the standard is 20 minutes. So if you exceed 20 minutes, usually that's considered, well, you're not loading or unloading something, you're just hanging out. And then the third thing I wanted to clarify is that 38th Street still has a lot of work to do. PennDOT's share rows only go from McClellan to Old French Road. So we need to have PennDOT finish from Old French all the way out to Green Garden. Most of it's easy. East 38th Street was actually very easy. We fought for a bike lane on that, and PennDOT wanted the Boulevard instead. That is from Old French to Pine. They wanted to extend that Boulevard all the way to McClellan, but they ran into funding problems. So when we came back as Bike Erie and asked, hey, you can't do the boulevard, will you give us the bike lanes? They said no. They're thinking maybe someday they'll get more money and still do the boulevard. But there is a serious challenge on 38th Street when you go through the zoo area and you're in Cherry all the way to Liberty. That's some tough infrastructure. So of everything on the Erie Urban Bike Loop, that's probably the toughest part right there. Other than that, most of it's striping. So thank you for everything the city has done for the active transportation plan. A lot of things we lament that things aren't happening in a more progressive way in Erie. The active transportation plan is to make Erie a more universally acceptable city for everyone. And that's why this is a big deal. And the Erie Urban Bike Loop is the start of that network. So thank you everybody who's helped to make this happen. And I'm glad people are participating because everybody should be heard as we do this. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to make a comment?
Karen Adams. I live at 3315 Green Garden. I want to point out a few things. First of all, on one of your slides, it said that Green Garden is the east border, so to speak. I believe you should change that to west. We were told, well, first of all, basically every time we've been here, whether it's been to council or whether we've been to a meeting of neighborhood with various council members present, every time we are told something different. And that's a frustration and that's a problem. But I also want to speak to the exceptions. We were specifically told that there was no state ordinance and that there was no city ordinance that would ban our parking. Now we're being told that that's not the case. We were told that the city would not pass an ordinance. The city council would not pass an ordinance that would ban our parking. Now let me be clear, parking is not an issue for me, but I know it is for many other residents. So that's going to bring me to all of the exceptions that were noted. It seems to me that the bulk of those exceptions would be happening during daylight hours when there would be more bikers using the bike path, the bike lane, than overnight hours. So why are we going to be limited on any of those other daytime hours, whether it's the weekends or whether it's during the week? Why is that happening? That does not make sense to me. I'm sorry. I believe that, I know that we were not involved. I did not live here in 17 when this started, but I know that for all of us between 26th and 38th Street, we received a letter dated January 18th of last year. And there was an article, we received it on a Saturday, the day before the Friday, the day before, there was an article in the paper about this. That was our first knowledge about any of this. And then the survey that was put out, you couldn't answer it the way you needed to, the way you wanted to. So many of us just gave up and didn't complete it because it was not going to be an honest response to what the questions were. So I would ask, please, that all of this be reconsidered. And the other point that I would like to make is that until all of the plan can be implemented, why can't Green Garden still be a shared lane? Once everything's implemented, then if we need to make changes, everyone will have gotten used to the share part of it, but at least then all of it will be the same. Instead of part share, part bikeway lane, part whatever, I don't understand what the other terminology was. This is going to be a while before the whole thing is put into place, correct? Correct? I'm not talking just Green Garden. I'm talking about the whole bike path plan. Isn't it going to be a while before all of it is implemented? I mean, French Street is supposed to be this year. Why can't we remain as a shared lane, especially given all the quote-unquote exceptions, until the whole thing is implemented? That to me is what makes more sense. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Brazelle. I live on West 27th Street, not far from Green Garden. I've used my bike my whole entire life. I've been an advocate for bicycling in Erie. This is not something that started in 17 or whatever. This is something that the city has been trying to do for 50 years, possibly longer. And I was just amazed that this sort of thing was happening until it all changed. So this improvement effort has to do with the health of every one of us in the community. Our streets have become hazardous to people on bicycles, pedestrians, people in wheelchairs, people driving cars. This also has to do with economics and outside investments, people that consider coming to Erie. This is something that cities that are advancing, this is something they do. They have proper infrastructure for everybody, not just cars. Thank you.
Other comments?
Everyone who wants to speak, please line up on the right side of the building. On the right side of the room. So Robert knows who's next. Please and thank you.
Hi, I'm David St. George. I live on Green Garden. I guess to Karen's point, I'd like to say that the residents really haven't been involved, and I'd like to know why. No meetings have ever really been taken with residents and project managers. David Forrest was to be our contact at City Hall about a year ago, and we were supposed to meet with him and talk about the project. He was let go, and there's not been a replacement. Well, how the residents supposed to know who the replacement is?
The replacement for the previous communications director is sitting right next to me.
He wasn't. David Forrest was an engineer, not the communications director. A project engineer, not the communications director. Frontier has a Cockrell Bridge project. There have been several meetings in the mayor's neighborhood with residents discussing the bridge options with engineers. Where have the meetings been? Why have the meetings been there and not for Green Garden? Will residents on other streets be ignored like we were? We really haven't met with anyone or talked to anybody. Bill Hayden sent an email last spring to residents after talking to consultants. Last spring he stated, quote, "We will be stopping the bike lane at 26th Street and not continuing on 38th. The current shoulder will remain as is with available on-street parking. The idea is that bikes will ride in the parking lane and traverse around parked cars when needed," end quote. And then this email was overturned a few days later by the communication director. I don't understand how narrow the 26th, going from Green Garden below 26th Street is narrow. And how wide is you say you can have two traffic lanes and 2 bike lanes, and then you still need to maintain 4 feet of distance between the bike and the traffic. How wide is the bike lane below 26th Street? And how wide is the traffic lane? It's very narrow there. I don't see how you can do that and have 4 feet between a biker. And at 26th Street, that's going to be the dangerous spot where everybody's going to have to file into the traffic lane before 26th Street, go across 26th Street riding with traffic. And I know you've given a number of 7,000 cars a day, but at rush hour in the mornings and at rush hour in the evenings, it's wall-to-wall cars there. Your plan is going to be dangerous, no matter what you do. There's not enough room there. So I don't see how you're going to get cars and bikes through there safely. There's just not enough room. You're gonna need to do something different. I know there's power poles and concrete work to be done. The mayor's can, another question. What will keep our street from becoming a free-for-all with some bikers going against traffic, or e-bikes on the bike path, joggers and dog walkers in the bike path? And I'm seeing that already. Aren't they going to be an obstacle? Instead of a biker having to go around a parked car, somebody's going to be walking their dog in the street. I'm seeing it already. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to hear an answer to that question.
Hello, I'm Evelyn Westman, and I live on at 2005 West 4th, and in the city. I think the plan is a good one. I think there's a lot of legitimate points about communication from the beginning for that particular neighborhood of the Green Garden. I really do think those are internal communication problems that the city seems to have on this particular issue. I don't know where it came from, not being an insider, but I do think that's something that needs to be looked at by the administration and council, and to improve it for the next time. Because if we're going to be doing this citywide plan, you'll have a lot of upset people. And it is a good plan. I believe it's a good plan. I'm a biker. I hope you all bike. And if you don't, start. And on Thursday nights when the weather is good, we have slow roll. And that's meets at Perry Square. And maybe one of these days we'll zip up Green Garden and there'll be a nice bike path. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Gates. I'm a resident of the Lower West Side. I have a whole family of bike commuters, including my teenage kids. I think at this point we all know the benefits of bike lanes, so I'm not going to talk about that. What I did want to talk about was the parking exceptions. I understand that the city, needed to compromise with the Green Garden residents, and a lot of those items in the ordinance are common sense. I use the 6th Street bike lane all the time, and there are, repair vehicles, maintenance vehicles, delivery vehicles. It happens, You don't need an ordinance for that. You just go around, not a big deal. People don't attempt to park their cars there, though. The things I did have an objection to were the holidays. I think, maybe if they limited the scope of the holidays, because, when do a lot of people ride bikes? 4th of July, Memorial Day. Those are probably the days that the 6th Street bike lane, the peninsula, those are probably the days they see the most bicycle traffic. So I would propose maybe amending that part. If the city does pass the parking ordinance, I would suggest that it be limited to Green Garden because of the yard sale, because that's unique to Green Garden. What else did I want to talk about? So I also wanted to say that I think the lane should continue all the way to Frontier Park. It doesn't really make sense for it to end at the Bayfront. And I also would like to see a 3-way stop at 8th and Green Garden. So that's all. Thank you.
I'm Gary Lackey. I live on Green Garden Boulevard. And I think most of us would be happy if we could just maintain some parking for our friends and family when we have visitors that are going to be forced to park, down the crossing street somewhere. It sounds like, even though we've been told, there's parking exceptions, it doesn't sound like that's going to make it in there. And I think that would make us all feel real happy if that was going to be an exception. But I think it could be an exception if we didn't, the bikers that bike on Green Garden now generally can flow down the traffic lane where the cars do, because it's just as easy to travel Green Garden. It's an LS1 or LST1. It's low stress on the Boulevard, and it really doesn't need the overkill of a buffered bike lane. I think that's overkill. But I get it. I mean, if you're going to make a bike lane in there, it really gets tight trying to get cars parked, bikers in there. I've seen it in various places in the city. It doesn't look very friendly to bikers to have a parking lane and then a skinny little bike lane, and so I understand the dilemma. It's just seems like we are going to those of us who live on the Boulevard are going to become more the underserved than those that are being served by the having bike lanes made for them throughout the city. And I understand that people need to travel all around the city in various kinds of other options besides a vehicle. I just would love to see the traffic sharrows, to me, would be an easy way, especially at the transition at 26th and Green Garden. If they're traveling down along the curb and they're coming into the turning lane there, you guys are, the turning lane is going to stay like on, let's say we're going north on Green Garden, we hit 26th. The bikers got to come out of the biking lane and merge into the turning lane with the bikers? Is that, with traffic? Is that how it works there? I know I saw your drawing a little bit, but I still couldn't make sense of it. So I was concerned about bikers traveling in the bike lane and getting to that turn, because cars generally are lined up down there, and currently the parking lane trying to, especially in the mornings, it's really busy right there. So I don't know. I'm just thinking it would seem safer if bikers travel in the travel lane on Green Garden Boulevard, and that would leave the parking alone.
Okay, do we have any other public comment? Any other public comment? Okay, if there's no other public comment, then Dan, would you be able to answer a couple of the questions that were asked?
Yep, sure. So, related to the questions about the design of the project, the one about why can't all bikeways or bike lanes be implemented at once? Really, it's based on a funding cycle, when funding is allocated for each project. And obviously, there's never going to be enough funding to implement all these bike lanes all at once throughout the entire city. So it's got to be done on a corridor by corridor basis as funding becomes available. The issue of dog walkers and other folks using the bike lane. Today they have a sidewalk where they could walk their dogs, and if there's an issue with that,
They're in the street right now.
that sounds like an enforcement problem. I mean,
Who's going to do it?
I can't speak to that, but I mean, that's the local police's jurisdiction to enforce the ordinances of the city. And then I think that would probably hold true for any no parking ordinances as well. I mean, it's up to somebody to enforce that. And I guess the last question was about the transition at 26th Street. So north and south of 26th Street, the bike lanes and the buffer will end approximately 100 to 200 feet in advance of the intersection. And the way that the travel lanes are oriented, the bikers will transition pretty smoothly into the travel lane. At least northbound, I know that's the case. And so they would become, either in the through direction, or if they wanted to turn left onto 26th Street, they would have to merge over to the left turn lane that's always already there. So we're not making any modifications to the turn lanes in that area.
Will there be markings indicating for the bikers to transition to that?
There will be signing, but no pavement markings. Yes.
Could you address vulnerable street users versus non-vulnerable street users? Just to educate us all as far as why we have bike lanes, why we tend to stay away from being in the road if we can.
I can try to. So, a vulnerable road user is considered anybody who's on a bicycle or a pedestrian who is not in a motor vehicle. They're at much greater risk of being injured in an accident because, a motor vehicle tends to travel a lot faster than someone on a bicycle, and certainly much, much faster than a pedestrian. So ideally, all those different categories of users are provided their own space, because when they intermingle, that's when accidents can occur, and usually vulnerable road users have a much higher risk of injury when they're involved in an accident. So a facility like this is ideal to separate users. Vehicle users, motorists get their lane, bicyclists get their lane, pedestrians have a sidewalk, so everybody is segregated, and it should lead to a much safer system. Hopefully that helps. Sure.
Will bike riders be banned from the street on residential parking days?
I don't believe so.
So we can coexist on those days?
That's how they travel around today, any street that doesn't have a bike lane.
Every day is the same. Why can't we get along is the president's question. We've done this for decades. Why can't we all get along and share a road? Green Garden is 20 feet wide. The mayor says landscape truck can park there, and it's safe for a biker to go around a landscape truck. But if a Toyota is parked there, that's dangerous. We can't do that. How is that? It's not consistent. Temporary for how many? We had concrete work done, and it was a week solid that cement trucks were on the road last year. A week solid, dump trucks, cement trucks, huge trucks. Was there an incident? No. All day long, first thing in the morning, 6 o'clock at night.
Do we have
5, 6
another
days in a
question
row.
or concern? We can move along.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind too is you may not be seeing a lot of bicyclists today because there's not a bicycle lane there. Right now, confident riders, sure, they don't mind sharing the road with motorists. They're much more experienced on their bicycles and know how to navigate traffic. But the idea of this plan is to get the less experienced riders out on the road, people who may not be as confident to share the road. So this would provide them their space to travel.
In November till April, there's very few riders.
That's not true. That is not true.
We'll take the next question here in the middle.
To me, this seems like this should be a municipal plan. I'm sure there are many people in Norfolk who would like to ride their bikes in the city like I do. Perhaps even Hard Creek or South Townships, so different people wish to South Townships. Why are we not discussing some of the alternatives with them? And for instance, Peninsula Drive is like wider all the way down than Green Garden is.
This plan was specifically for the city of Erie. That was the scope of the project.
I
So
understand, but like that.
I think that's a great idea to expand it in the future.
They have a rapid transportation plan and Peninsula Drive was identified. So the next point to that is that Peninsula Drive and 26 North
Does anybody in the city of Erie have a box board to be out on a meeting? All right, okay, so, nobody parks in front of their house on Green Garden on purpose, whether it's temporary or, am I correct, my neighbors? Nobody parks on Green Garden on purpose. I've gone up down Green Garden a gazillion times, and if there's, one day, if about a week's time frame, there's a car parked in front of somebody's house on Green Garden, it's not there for home care, all right, situation like that, there's nobody parking there. Why would I park in front of my house on Green Garden when I have a driveway? All right? But, my grandson's gonna get baptized in the Blessed Sacrament. I brought this up at the original meeting, all right? I was told, invite enough people over that can fit in your driveway. Because we're not gonna let them park in front of their house. Now, that's not the most asinine thing I ever heard. I don't know what is. All right, we're not doing this on purpose, it's not temporary. We don't park there unless we absolutely positively have to park there. All right, and I don't know what it's gonna take for people to understand that. We don't, let's put our car in front of the house and the biker's gotta go around it. We don't do that. All right, I ride my bike all over the place too. Okay, we don't do that. Nothing is being done on purpose. Okay, all we're saying is in the event of the fact that we have to park in front of our house because of a reason, all right, such as a giant party or whatever it is, all you want to do is get treated like the rest of the citizens of the city of Erie and have the ability to park in front of our house if that were to happen. Now, if I got to call down to Timmy Beverage and say, Tim, I'm going to have a party in front of my house, if I get a ticket, can I bring it up to you? All right, or we're hard enough to work out, or the parking authority, we're hard enough to work out. We're not here to antagonize, we're just here to say, if we need to, let us. We're not going to, nobody's going to sit there and say, God, now I can park in front of my house because the bike path isn't going to go through. I think the bike path on Sassafras is just gorgeous with that green striping and everything else. Paint it, they didn't ever tell you you wanted to. That's great. We're not going to park there unless we absolutely have to. I guess that's our, I think everybody on Green Garden should be treated that. Right? The bikers showing up Green Garden, they're out there, I see the ride bike with their lights on, they're fantastic, I love them. I go up and down the street, I love them, right? That's great. But don't tell me if I'm having a baptism in my house, I gotta have people park, I can invite 6 people. I think we did it for Christmas. I had 7 cars in my driveway. All right? But if I didn't have an 8th person invited, they would have parked in front of my house. That's all we're asking for.
I want to ask you something. I'm not trying to be antagonistic at all. I just, maybe somebody knows. What about everyone on West 6th Street? They don't park in front of their house.
I don't live on West 6th Street.
Maybe.
All right, I'll tell you. West 6th Street always had parking on it. West 6th Street, am I correct? Ed, you've been around as long as we have. West 6th Street's always had parking lane. Our Green Garden has had parking lane. You're taking something away, once again, you're taking something away that doesn't need to be taken away because it's not that big of an issue. All right? And Bill, Mr. Nelson one day, is this Chuck here? Mr. Nelson, I think for a week or so, was doing the aerial photos of Green Garden. All right? And he goes, out of that week time span, he saw 1 car parked on the street. 1 car parked on the street. So I guess that's all my neighbors are trying to say to us.
I understand what you're saying, but, I mean, and I know that you guys don't want to park on the street, but what about when the plan is implemented on different streets that don't have big driveways?
They're not going to have to. They're not going to restrict the parking. You can't restrict the parking on the streets you show us.
I think that what really is going on here right now is that there's a mechanism being put in place to encourage bicycling. And I don't know any bicyclist that I've met that's militant, that wants to punish people. I think what this is doing is this is creating a mechanism by which if somebody is just obstinate and wants to be antagonistic, then the city has a mechanism by which it can say, hey, stop doing that. But honestly, birthday parties, anniversaries, graduation, I don't know of a biker that's going to get kicked off because someone was doing that.
Bikers are not as banned
question here in the middle.
So I just want to validate or ask a question of Amanda and Eric, because I know that you guys fight all over town and stuff. But we've lived on Green Garden for 31 years, and there have been bikers up and down all 31 years of that. And there have been times that the biking has increased, and there have been times that we haven't seen as much of it. We're seeing more now, which is fine. It's not an issue now. That's why I really don't understand why we're even going down this road. I mean, have there been concerns with your bike routes on Green Garden specifically that they were hit by a car or, because we haven't seen that, so I'm just asking that question, I'm just trying to,
It's not Green Garden specifically, the whole point is to make a network, like a network, so that you can get anywhere in town within a couple blocks, being on a bike lane, and just, it's a safe way for.
but that's
Why we're taking out more things, less than people can share the road, why are you making us, well, we can't park on this street, we're not doing shared road, we're doing that.
So here's what this is all about. When I was a kid, I grew up in that neighborhood. I rode everywhere. There was pure cars, pure craziness going on the road. Maybe people this direction too, but, in the past, there was no separate line. It was a free for all. It was, wait. In the last 3 years, deaths on the roads have gone up phenomenal. And it isn't bicycles, it's just pedestrian, it's cars too. So our highways, our roads have been built, this is the design principle, have a maximum amount of cars, maximum amount of speed. And it's just isn't a good human principle. It's not a good city principle. Cities across the planet have been doing this type of stuff for a long time. And it's just, to me, it's insane to not have a safe way for everybody to get around the community. Excuse me. It's just, it's nothing new. It might be new to a lot of us here, but, obviously a lot of these people, you just don't understand what this is all about. And you need to read.
Why should we like on this share the road? It's not like we're telling you can't come here. We let you, we just don't want to give up our parking.
I guess my question
We'll
would be.
share the road with you, but we're not telling you don't come and come on Greenland. We're just telling you come, we don't take away our parking rights.
The question for the solicitor. Okay, I'm having a birthday party at my house and the red car comes up, so I put tickets on the cars. I'm able to walk and say, hey, look, this is, we had an understanding with whoever, all right, that, we have an exception, this is an exception to the exceptions. All right, if I get a ticket, are they gonna write me a ticket? This is what's gonna happen, if this goes through and it's passed as it is, this is going to come up.
How do you police that?
Yeah, how is it going to be policed?
I think you have police officers on Green Garden Boulevard right now who could balance the bike with the car sticks, with speeders at will.
Yeah.
So, just saying.
I don't know anything about that. But to answer your question, what everyone is concerned about sounds like to me is the enforcement. Everyone is nervous and scared that if I park my car, my kid is home from college, they're in the driveway, park out front, are they going to get a ticket?
Yes.
No one wants to get a ticket. No one wants. I understand the process. I've got parking tickets. Now, the city. I think everyone talks about why can't we share the road perhaps or work together. Well, the city is asking for the same thing. In a way, what they're trying to say is we have an ordinance. We're trying to implement this bike plan. The ordinance possibility, but that's, again, that's why we're having this conversation, and that's why we're having this meeting in particular. So I think that might alleviate some of the enforcement issues, because it really sounds like the residents, and correct me if I'm wrong, don't really use the street for parking, but there are moments during the year. And that's why one of the exceptions was like church ceremonies. That's kind of vague. That's because, again, we're still working on this.
We don't go to church at our house, so.
I understand that, but maybe you could have Bible studies. I don't know. I'm not going to judge anyone particularly. Right. So I think maybe you have a contact person with the parking authority or a city hall, and then we have, say, hey, June 25th, whatever the time period is. Something like that. That's kind of.
Does that change anything though?
What if
The cars on the street, the bikers?
So it helps. What you want, what you guys want, my understanding is to avoid the enforcement. No tickets. You don't use the street except for special occasions. That's what I've been hearing. So the birthday, no. The birthday is a special occasion, the baptism is a special occasion, that kind of stuff.
No, is it going to be easy to get somebody on the line?
Well, it is, like, I mean, honestly, nowadays with cell phones, if there's this is an idea, I just presented literally now.
We're talking about.
So we get
at the narrowest portion between 16th Street and 25th Street. Well, I think it's 21st Street. We're providing a 10-foot travel lane and a 5-foot bike lane. So, you know, perfectly.
So there's not.
There are certainly tractor trailers that use that segment of roadway.
Yeah, it's safety, that's all I'm saying there. And this whole thing could have been averted if we had this kind of conversation before the plans went in. We talked to everybody at PennDOT, and I said, everything is in design stage. We're finishing 12 blocks of Green Garden with nothing else in place, except Cray Street that goes to no place, and French Street, which is going to be a bigger project. I just, I want the safety of the bikers, that's important. But I also want our people that pay their taxes in this town to know what's going on. So.
Yeah, there's nobody here from Front Street, and you're supposed to start that soon?
This meeting in particular is to discuss Green Garden Boulevard and not French Street. That will be a later project, a separate project. So the design for this project and the bids and everything, those are public documents. It was not bid through the city of Erie, it was bid through PennDOT. But all of these documents are publicly accessible. There was nothing hidden or kept from anybody. All of these documents are publicly accessible if you desire to see them.
Requests to see bids.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I got a few requests to see bids, I did not see one.
I can't speak to that. I didn't see any requests, but they don't go to me. Like I said, it was bid through PennDOT.
Our engineering department. It's been out of the store. I talked to everybody at PennDOT right after this trans. They said we're in design stage, but we're not in design stage. That's a rework, so it's supposed to get confused.
I can tell you the folks in the city engineering department were well aware when this project was advertised, when the bids came in, what the costs were associated with it.
I wasn't privy to the information when I asked them. That's all I'm saying.
I can't speak to that.
It wasn't an issue.
We have a question up front here.
I have a question not about the Green Garden as you put it as a whole, for the winter cycling, because I am a winter cyclist. Do you guys have a plan to help keep the bike lanes clear in the winter months? I know that would help keep the bicycle traffic more consistent year round. For example, in Norway, they have a city where 50% of the population bikes year round. Are we going to have our bike lanes cleared within, say, an inch or two of snow so that cyclists can be safe riding and not worry about riding in the top of the low proper as I am doing now, because it's the only clean spot?
Right. That's a great question. I believe that would fall under typical snow removal procedures. It's also one of the benefits of not installing the vertical delineator posts is to allow a standard size snow plow to remove the snow along the corridor. So there shouldn't be any issues with snow removal if there aren't any today. In the back?
So just as an FYI, we filed a right to know request last year, and we were wanting the minutes from the meetings, all the meetings that went up to these decisions that were made, and we were told that there were no meeting minutes that were available for us to see. How can that be?
I can't speak to that. I mean, these are public council meetings, so I would refer to the city council on that. I can't answer that.
See who the participants in it were, because we thought, well, maybe we were being represented, but we couldn't see who any of the attendees for any of the meetings were. I just, that's a law, that you have to give that information.
Quick comment. I think with some of the right to knows, there's a possibility you asked for meeting minutes of a transcript. No one's going to produce a transcript after today. And meeting minutes aren't really official. You may have been directed to go to the city's
A copy of the active transportation plan final study is available on the city website. Right? It's on the same active transportation plan
We wanted
page.
to know how it all developed and what the conversation was at the meetings and those kind of things. Because anyone that is on project management, I would think that there would be documentation of this was discussed, this was the assignment, those kind of things. And maybe that doesn't happen in most places.
I'd like to just, about design and implementation, it just seems like, buffer bike lane down Green Garden is just ahead of its time. And if it ever would need to be done, because 38th Street and north of 26th on Green Garden could really use that buffer bike lane. Up there, and down there. Not on the Boulevard. I mean, the Boulevard doesn't have 8,000 cars going both directions, a day. I don't think it's suggested. No, just a buffer, 3-foot buffer lane with the side out bike lane. It just seems so much overkill, and it just eliminates us from being able to have that anxiety of having to figure out who to park in it. And it just seems unnecessary, to do it here now. It just seems like, why not work on 38 or why not work on north of 26? What Bill Eichmann suggested, it seemed like a great common sense thing. I don't necessarily expect that out of government or city government or anything. I mean, it makes sense. Just, we're going to leave Green Garden alone for now. We're just letting you guys know. We're just going to put signs so people know it's a bike lane. But I think the bikers are even safer traveling as they do now, especially at the intersection of 26th and Green Garden. And I don't know.
I think we heard from some of the bike advocates about 38th Street in particular and how the shared lane markings there are not the safest means. So that kind of ties in, though, to why we want to provide bike lanes where we have the space, preferably buffered bike lanes where we have the space. And that section between 26th Street and 38th Street has the existing pavement available that can be reallocated for bike lanes and a painted buffer. And so that's the reason why we decided on that type of bike facility.
It's not going to be that much safer than it is now, in my mind. It's safe, it's eligible, it's safe. Not to drive Green Garden. It's not safe to go Green Garden north or 38 over to Green Garden. It's just, those are two unsafe connectors that need help.
I mean, there are future plans.
You can keep a 4-foot buffer on the lower part of Green Garden below 26th Street. You said it was a 10-foot lane and a 5-foot spot for the bikes. There are large trucks that go down. There's cement trucks and what have you that go down by the tracks. So if you have a 10-foot truck or even a 9-foot truck and a biker's got to take up, 2.5 feet? You're not going to maintain 4 feet between the biker and a large vehicle there. How can you say that's good?
I believe
You're
that
not going to maintain
street is
4
the
feet
same
there.
width as West Sixth Street, where there is a bike lane on either side. I travel that lane daily, and I don't think we can really use.
It's a narrow bike.
So if you think about what happens today if there's a bicyclist in that section where it's 15 feet wide and a tractor trailer's driving down, there's no painted bike lane, and they have to pass a bicyclist, what do they do today? Well, they either slow down and follow the cyclist until they can safely pass, or there's no oncoming traffic and they go into the opposing traffic, pass the bicyclist, and keep on their way. And so what we're doing is providing a safe lane for the bicyclists, but really not.
But you're not maintaining the 4 feet. You just have it on the screen.
Then there's other options. Either the motorist has to follow behind the bicyclist, or they have to wait for a safe point to pass that bicyclist by crossing into the opposing travel lane. That's the law. That's how it's intended.
Yeah, I'd like to offer that one of the things that, following this process, one of the things that has been encouraging is that government works well when it moves in incremental changes. And right now, we've got an environment where there's radical stuff trying to push the pendulum way too far on one way or the other. This process has been navigating its way for an incremental change. again, like I said earlier, I'm glad everybody's weighing in. That has to be part of it.
It's a consistency thing, though. If we can have bikers going below 26th Street and it's narrower and trucks coming and they'll have to stop and, give them room. But when we come down Green Garden, where it's a 20-foot wide lane and there's all kinds of room, you can't park there.
Okay, so I think we had some good conversation here. Thank you to our presenters. And just a reminder, the Active Erie Transportation Plan is on the city's website, so please take a look at it. And more to come on this. One final question?
One more comment that hasn't been brought up tonight. First of all, I want to thank the city for the lights and those lane changes at 32nd Street. That's very positive. It has slowed traffic down in the morning rush hour, but it has not slowed traffic otherwise. And if we're going to have the bike lane, whether it's a share lane or a bike lane, we still need more presence and to enforce the speed limit on street cars. And I think it's safer for everybody, but especially for the bike lane.
Thank you for that.
Until that time. There was, a couple of weeks ago, I was watching and I rolled over into the bike lane, parking lane, whatever you want to say. I live at 3300 block, pulled over all the way to 32nd Street. And they were not doing 25 miles an hour. And that was because everybody was stopped because of the new light, which is great. But until we get everybody on board, we need more assistance in the police department. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Safe travels home.